That one is a strange one too, because I couldn't tell what he was trying to say with the group itself, because there's like a Nazi in it, and then the other two seem to be just kind of almost homicidal in a strange way. But even when he's going with the Black Revolutionaries, the reason that he gets inspired is because he has sex with one of the women. So it always seems to be like this kind of mixed signal or mixed bag of what his real motivation is by the end of the day. Like he's a part of these things, but it does seem to almost be to get his rocks off at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The movie's kind of defined by the opening quote, the 1960s, happy times, heavy times. You know, it alternates between those two things of where are you part of the sexually liberated movement that's just having a good time and smoking weed, or are you part of the, you know, sort of like politically oppressed 1960s, you know, and he opens the film by, you know, having a bunch of like construction animals shitting on the college kids today and like literally pissing off the side of a skyscraper that they're working on and landing on a hippie kid below them, which then turns into like the pixie dust from like Peter Pan or something like that.
Yeah, and the title card and everything, like that's kind of the opening. That's the atmosphere that he's giving you right away. What's interesting,
he's like, I'm pissing on hippie kids, I'm shitting on the kids, and he's also having he has a song that's like, hey, all you fucking intellectuals, you think you know where it's at? Before you fill your minds with any junk, you better listen to Fritz the cat.
Yeah. What's interesting too is that the way that he uses audio, because a lot of the times, I guess he would just record conversations like on the street. For instance, with the opening construction workers, it's actually construction workers that he just ended up having a conversation with and then used a little snippet of it. I think he's did that a couple times with like on the New York City streets, and he doesn't really edit them. Apparently,
he does it in the Harlem bar too. Yeah.
Right. And apparently like the audio people were like, dude, this is just unprofessional. Like this sounds like garbage. We got to clean this up. And he's like, no, I want it to sound kind of real and authentic. And it does. And I do like that. I will say that there's a couple times because of it, it's a little bit difficult to hear dialogue. It's a little bit muddy. But once again, that does give a kind of lived in experience. So it's hard to say. My audio like nerd is going, that needs to be cleared up. But then
you need to fucking clean that up, dude.
Totally gets why he's doing it. So yeah, it's
well, because again, he wants to give some of that like real, you know, that grit and that authenticity of this sort of city life that he's intending to be depicting, but then also bringing it into this very, you know, ridiculous, absurd world where he can play around with it, right? So he wants both of those things, which we talked about in the style, which is because Crumb's style, you know, was you know, very sharp, but also very, you know, it harkened back to those old kind of like hand-drawn Disney styles and those very old school, you know, kind of absurd, you know, anthropomorphic character designs and things that obviously weren't very realistic, but he drew them with a pen that was designed for like technical engineering or something like that, so that it had this really stark quality to it. And Bakshi apparently used the same type of like pen and ink in order to do his version. And when it came to the city life stuff, as we mentioned, he took actual photos of Harlem, of Chinatown, and then he did that sharp drawing over top of it. So it was almost like, you know, how could he almost merge this sort of live action adult world that he felt could exist in the animated world, and, you know, has that rawness to it, and, you know, wasn't like that Disney musical shit, but he could still be expressive. Like a lot of this is on like watercolor paper, and it does have some like surreal, colorful elements to it, some like bizarre uses of perspective and stuff like that. But like it's very crude, and it's very cheaply made, obviously. Like I think a lot of people would look at this and be like, the animation's pretty amateurish, but it has a certain sort of low budget charm to it, I'd say.
Yeah, like he did mention something like he was having trouble getting the animations of the mouth movement right on with the dialogue, just because like I said, the way that he recorded dialogue is a very natural way of doing things. So you can't really you can do some editing, I'm sure, but you can't line it up perfectly. So I think he did something where he was he actually did a flip book and timed it that way so that he could know when the dialogue was matching up with the cartoons that they were illustrating. So there is a little bit of that crude, off sync kind of thing, but like you said, it goes well with the rest of the kind of crude animation as well. And I do really there's a couple cityscapes in this that I just love. I might take them for wallpaper, where they do the fisheye lens of New York City, and it just makes the buildings look kind of stretched out and bigger than they actually are. And
the actual photographs are just kind of nice. He uses them all at the very end. It's actually just
oh right, yeah, you see all the real ones that he kind of took from, which is very cool. Yeah, it's beautiful work, honestly. For as crude as it can be sometimes, it's still there's a reason for it, and it doesn't feel it never feels lazy. Even later on, we'll get to it, but with Wizards, there's some background stuff that feels a little bit almost like you'd think it's hand sketches that weren't completed, but it just adds to a certain atmosphere that they're going for at the time. It's very cool.
Yeah. But the actual narrative of this is insane and
it's all
bizarre,
over the place.
and I think definitely as a writer, I actually think that Wizards, he actually does